everybody. My hair is blue. Did you notice? Do you love it? Do you think it's amazing? Oh, thanks. Stop it. You guys are like too sweet. Today, I actually wanted to make a bit of a serious video though. I just wanted to have a chat about what it means to be a good vegan and whether or not I think I'm a good vegan, what I think a good vegan is, and all that sort of thing. Generally, if you think of like a good vegan, you think of somebody who's all into clean eating and whole foods, and they're an animal rights activist maybe, they're really passionate. Generally, you think of somebody who's also like fit and healthy, maybe they're into yoga and stretching. So that's kind of what the kind of first thing that comes to mind when I think of the kind of ideal vegan stereotype that's bandied around on social media and the interweb and all that. But for me, that whole idea of a good vegan implies that if you eat processed foods, if you aren't super skinny, if you don't look a certain way, if you aren't fit, if you aren't healthy, if you aren't active, if you aren't happy, then you're a bad vegan. And that's not something that I am comfortable with. So there are two requirements that I have for myself in terms of how I want to be a good vegan. So the two things are, I would like to be an intersectional vegan and I would like to be a food positive vegan. Now, you might not know what intersectional veganism is, or you might not have thought that intersectionalism applies to veganism, or you might already be an intersectional vegan yourself, which is great. My personal understanding of, or definition of intersectionality is recognizing that different identities overlap. It's basically the converging of identities as they relate to having or not having privileges associated with those identities. That's kind of my definition of it. So how does this apply to veganism? Well, I think it's important to firstly recognize that vegans are not all skinny white girls who do yoga. I am white, I am relatively thin, and I am a person who really enjoys and has found benefits from practicing yoga. But it's also important to recognize that this is not the only face of veganism. That black people can be vegan, that men can be vegan, that poor people can be vegan, that unhealthy people can be vegan, that overweight people can be vegan, that unhappy people can be vegan, that queer people can be vegan. I mention unhappy because so often we link this kind of, it's like if you go vegan, all your problems will be solved, and if I go vegan, I will be the happiest person alive, but that's simply not true. Veganism is not a cure for depression. Veganism is not a solution to all your life problems, but for me personally, I have found that it makes me feel better, both like ethically and physically, and so I found a lot of benefits from it, but it's just simply not true to say that veganism will cure your depression. Another aspect of intersectional veganism is recognizing how the meat industry affects different groups of people, not just animals. Yes, it's important to recognize that the meat industry exploits animal labor and that it's just not very nice really, and it's kind of gross and whatever, but it's also important to recognize that it negatively impacts the workers who work in the meat industry, that often the people who work in slaughterhouses who have to perform horrible jobs like slaughtering animals are often people who are themselves exploited by the meat industry. For me, being an intersectional vegan also means acknowledging the role that meat has in certain cultures, acknowledging how the role that meat plays might affect a person's decision to go vegan, acknowledging that for certain people, choosing to go vegan means choosing to give up certain practices associated with their culture, and that it might alienate them from their family or from other people of that culture. It's also acknowledging that access to veganism is a thing that not everybody has. It is possible to be vegan on a budget. It's possible to have low-cost vegan food. It's even possible to kind of be living on the poverty line and be vegan. However, it's still not necessarily something that's accessible for everybody. It might not be within your means at a certain time to start living a vegan lifestyle. You might not have access to the information that you need to be able to healthily live a vegan lifestyle on a budget. Yes, it would be great if the whole world went vegan, like this is, you know, like a dream. The second thing I'd like to talk about is what do I mean by food positive? Clean eating, fit food, healthy eating, whole foods. These are generally terms associated with vegan, also gluten-free, superfoods, things like that. I personally try to eat food that is good for me. I believe that healthy eating is very beneficial. It can help you with your exercise goals. I just feel better generally when I eat healthier food. I also just like food in general, and sometimes you just gotta fry something, or you gotta eat that like Steers fast food veggie burger. You know, like for me it's about having that balance between eating food that allows me to dance every day as I do and that makes me feel good, but also eating food that is fun to eat and fun to make and that sort of thing. So it's just about, for me it's about finding the balance between the two. But that's my personal eating philosophy. I acknowledge that not everybody wants to be healthy, that a good diet does not guarantee good health, and that size is not an indication of health. There's also this kind of like idea that if you eliminate certain foods from your diet, you can get rid of your chronic pain or your chronic illness, and while for some people managing their diet has helped them to manage their chronic illness, that this isn't necessarily a correlation that's going to happen for everybody. And I also think it's important to be like, acknowledge that some people are just don't really care that much about food. So it might sound like a lot of things to do at once and a lot of things to think about, and maybe you're like, no, I'm just even more part of veganism, it sounds like so much work. But I think the biggest like takeaway for me is that it's just important to recognize that there are different people who are vegan, and to listen to as many different vegan and non-vegan voices out there and try and separate like opinion from fact. Basically, just try and be a decent person. Well, some of my favorite vegans that I think y'all should check out for food inspiration and intersectional veganism inspiration are A Privileged Vegan, Lauren Toyota, and Vegan Zinga. The links to all these people will be in the description, and just like any other useful resources that I happen to think of at the time. Guys, thanks for listening to what is probably going to be a really long video. If you have any thoughts and you want to start a discussion, that's cool. Be kind though. Comment, like, subscribe to my channel.